to 360 Info. I'm your host, Antonio. To manipulate history is to manipulate consciousness. And to manipulate consciousness is to manipulate possibilities. And to manipulate possibilities is to manipulate power. Welcome to the show. We got a great show for you today. Yes, well, we just had a little blast from the past, y'all. Yeah, we don't get comfortable, but that's okay. We doing good still so far this winter. Just had a little setback, temporary setback. Mother Nature got to do its thing. And it's kind of like almost segue in what we're gonna be talking about, dealing with cycles and things that occur on a regular basis and things like that. And by doing that, it can give you a good heads up of what to come. See, that's what we kind of lost. That's why history and everything is so important. Great show for you today. We're coming at you with a little few snowflakes going down and things like that. In the remote studio, we got Brother Vince. What's going on, Vince?
Well, I don't know, man. It's probably somewhere below freezing, and we got maybe 8 or 10 inches out there. But by the end of next week, we'll be in the 40s again, and hopefully, all that ugly white stuff will be gone. But a lot of stuff going on, and some things that we'll get into. You mentioned the subject matter of today's show, and we are definitely going to be talking about some cycles, probably one of the most important cycles that we can be privy to in our lives. I've been around for a few decades, and I know you have too, but we haven't witnessed anything in terms of the cycle that we're in right now. So we are bringing Wayne Chandler to give some clarity to that idea and give you some suggestions as to your mindset right now, because there's a lot going on. Antonio,
Yes, sir.
we haven't had this conversation, and we're going to give Brother Wayne a chance to get dialed in. But there was an interview that took place a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you know about it. It got over 40 million views on YouTube, and it involved one of your colleagues in the world of comedy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
he
Oh
was
yeah.
he was firing shots that have been heard all around the world. And some of us look at it as a distraction, and I can clearly see why. But I'm looking at it as an indication of where we are now, and I think this kind of coincides with the subject for today's show, and it just deals with the end of the cycle of Pisces and the beginning of a cycle that involves Aquarius. Now, the jury is out. Some people say we're there. Some are reluctant to say that that's where we are right now. But I think it's definitely worth discussing. And we're going to talk about how the whole Cat Williams phenomenon is related to where we are right now. To assist us in this conversation, we have one of the greatest minds living in the city of Cleveland right now. We have him on the show all the time. He's probably one of our most frequent guests. And this brother right here is not just a guest on 360 Info Network. He's guesting like Cat Williams on podcasts that are seen around the world. One of the folks that he collaborates with is a brother named Brother Rich, who I believe is in New York. He has a show called 363 Black Magic. I think that's his moniker. And I have been with Wayne as he's been on one of these shows, but he's a frequent guest on that show as well. So we're going to dive into this whole idea of the Kali Yuga. Brother Wayne, how are you today?
I'm getting there, slowly but surely.
All right. Well, or you may not know that, like myself, Brother Wayne is a night owl, so we don't get up at the crack of dawn.
That's true.
So we're up now, and glad to be with you. I wanted to give some clarity to this whole phenomenon called the Kali Yuga, and I'm going to preempt the question by just letting you know that Brother Wayne is the author of a book called Ancient Future, The Teachings and Prophetic Wisdom of the Seven Hermetic Laws of Ancient Egypt. And I think his authorship of that book is one of the things that qualifies him to engage in this conversation with us today. So with that, I will thank you for joining us today, Brother Wayne, and just jump right in and ask you, what is the Kali Yuga?
Yeah, the Kali Yuga is one of the four great ages that planet Earth undergoes. And it began in 3102 BCE, and it's 432,000 years long. And the thing with the Kali Yuga that differentiates it from all of the other ages is that all of the other ages, the other three, are contained within the Kali Yuga.
Right.
So a lot of people right now, have listened to this event that took place on January the 15th. And the individual who was spearheading that program said that this was the end of the Kali Yuga, which was information that he got from his teacher, who is East Indian by ethnicity. And what he's saying is that it's not technically the end of the Kali Yuga, but the Kali Yuga is now moving into this place where its energy, which is that of perpetual downtrodden darkness, is about to end. And we are now getting ready to go into one of the higher frequencies of the other ages. And so the Kali Yuga, after we've been in this particular age that we're about to open the door to, for about 2,000 years, we'll be in this golden age, this age of high vibrational frequency, this age of expanded consciousness and spiritual light. After we move through about 2,000 years of that, we actually drop back into the darkness of the Kali Yuga. So what I've always found intriguing about the Kali Yuga is that how it reflects the divine consciousness of balanced intent of what we refer to as the all, or the creator, the God force, that has brought all of this into being. Because if the Kali Yuga went uninterrupted for 432,000 years, there would be no human force that could withstand that kind of a beatdown. And so what we get is that as we go through these various periods of darkness in the Kali Yuga and do sustain a pretty severe challenge with respect to the ability to grow, to expand, it becomes overwhelming, overbearing. And then we get this period where we're able to literally breathe and engage in things that reflect our higher nature that has been given us through our soul force and our spiritual aptitude by the divine.
So what I'm hearing you say is that perhaps not everyone, but some of us will be vibrating in a higher frequency, and it is going to enable us to perhaps deal with the things that are coming our way. We have conversations all the time about how the elites are looking to take over the planet and control everyone, and use currency as a means to do that. And, you know, there are white lines in the sky that result in metals coming to the ground and corrupting the quality of the soil, and all these environmental things that are happening. Of course, we can talk about jab juice, and we're being really careful because we're also in an age where what we say can come back to haunt us for whatever reason, just because of the level of censorship that's taking place. When you talk about a golden age, how does this golden age compare to what we're coming out of?
Well, the Kali Yuga is extremely dark. As a matter of fact, that's what it means. The Kali Yuga literally means the age of darkness. And illusion is the keynote energy that is really integrated into the Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is the age of darkness, the age of illusion. And being that, I always hold that reality front and center, which means that whatever I'm getting out of three-dimensional design, I take it with a grain of salt until I can personally verify its authenticity. Because being and coming from out of the age of darkness, the age of illusion, 98% of the time, it's going to be fraudulent and dealing with misdirection. So I have to take it upon myself, as others need to take it upon themselves, to really go in and determine, you know, the real, in what it is they're examining, based on media sources, based on what they're getting out of the environment as a whole. It behooves us to really go in and do our own body of research to determine the facts, as we see them, as we experience them, and not allow us as individuals to be guided or herded into the real, based on the system that we are integrated with.
Right. You know what I was thinking too, Wayne, on some of the issues that, that you may come across and probably not work for everything, is when you talked about some of the principles in your book and in the Kabbalion and things like that, that really opened me up for being able to discern certain things that come your way. And that's why I love the Eastern philosophy and thinking, because they centered it around nature. And so nature is nature is the only and true truth, and that's where they actually put their spirituality, intertwine their spirituality around nature, because nature is constant. Nature is doing its thing. Nature's, one African brother say nature is God. That's what it is. It's just his energy being expressed in everything. And we say it in the Christian faith, so if you base yourself on information that you receive based on those principles that are constant, more than likely you be more spot on than just winging it, and coming up with some type of hypothesis that may be off. So base it on those principles of nature that are solid, that is constant. Weigh this information with that, and if it passed the litmus test, then it's more likely you can go with it.
Yeah, for sure, no question. And that's something, because the cultural design that we live in, that we're a part of, is very anti-nature.
Yes.
And so because of that, we take it upon ourselves to create our individual realities from the information that the culture, imparts to us. And we never stop to think, well, what is the fabric? What is the texture of the culture that we live in, that we are a part of, that we absorb our daily information from? Is it a culture that has high value? Is it a culture based on spiritual and real, authentic divine intent? Does it create a pathway for one to explore, to expand themselves in greater abundance, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually? So we have to look at the nature of the culture of which we have become affiliated with, and determine what this culture gives us that is authentic, and what it gives us that is inauthentic and
Anti.
fabricated and
Anti.
really downtrodden.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you
I
know,
thought,
it's interesting when you were saying that we deal with this whole world of illusion, and I can't help but think about the fact that 95% of the media is owned by 5 different companies. So most of what we see, there's a gatekeeper that controls what we see and what we don't see. But when we talk about shifting into this new age, and we look at the idea that we are possibly in the age of Aquarius, the age of Aquarius is an age that is characterized by truth. The mantra of the previous age, if that is the case, the age of Pisces, was I believe. The mantra of the age of Aquarius is I know. So we're seeing the lifting of the veil, proverbially, so to speak. And now the truth is bubbling up to the surface. I mean, if we look at what we went through in the past 3 years and how many of the things that were told to us at the onset of the situation that we were in, and now how we're learning that what was said wasn't absolutely correct, and things like being 6 feet apart was not based on scientific evidence. Now we're beginning to see the truth. I spoke about the Cat Williams phenomenon before you joined us, Brother Wayne, and I think it's really interesting how so much of the conversation around that 2 hour and 46 minute video was about things being true and folks having to acknowledge the veracity of what was said or the untruth of it. And it turns out that most of the things that were said by this person were true. And we can expand that to a lot of other things that are happening in our society that are contradicting this illusionary narrative that we've been getting. Do you see any connection between where we were and where we are now with respect to how we're having, it seems, greater access to the truth?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the invisible constructs that really were in place and allowed us to operate and function in specific ways that were not about the real, are beginning to disintegrate. And in the disintegration of those constructs, that which is the real is able to find a voice, in terms of just looking at the authenticity of where human beings and human mind needs to venture to bring about the kind of balance to the level of dysfunction that we've been living in culturally for so many millennia. And that in itself, is indicative of the removal of the framework that creates and determines the energy of the Kali Yuga. So as those elements begin to dissipate and are eradicated from, our daily method, means, mode of being challenged culturally, we find ourselves with a lot more wiggle room and the ability, to search out the real and find more of the answers that we need for our own level of, self investigation, self expansion, self integration. There is an old saying that actually comes from an ancient code that was penned by one of the samurai, and it says, "It is said that which is called the spirit of an age is something to which one cannot return. That this spirit dissipates is due to the world's coming to an end. Though one would like to change today's world back to the spirit of 5,000 years ago or more, it cannot be done. Therefore, we must make the best out of every generation." And so when we listen to that and frame it in proper context, we're looking at the construct of Kali Yuga and the removal of its energy from where we sit currently in time and space. And what's really fascinating is that this whole concept of the yugas is also embraced in the Igbo West African tradition, where they refer to these great cycles as the ugas, where in the blacks of ancient India, the spelling was Yuga, but in the African Igbo tradition, it's just Uga, and it's not the Kali in their system that we're moving into. It's called the Uga Azi. And their four major ages are the Uga Aka, the Uga Chi, the Uga Anwu, and then the Uga Azi, which flows in line and synchronicity with the Kali.
Wayne, question.
Yeah, I just wanted to amplify the fact that you answered Steve's question, because he asked who named it the Kali Yuga. So thank you for providing that answer, Brother Hamtonio.
Yeah, it's interesting to see now, Wayne. We're going in this cycle, and actually, we can't do anything about it. The question is, how much work does an individual have to do? Because the energy is upon us, and I guess how much work it seems like some of this enlightenment is coming upon us on. We can see the change across the planet in different countries where people are, I always like to use the example of African historical stuff is going on in Africa that a lot of us I think is not paying attention to. And so that energy just seems to be coming upon the people. So how much work does the individual have to do in order to navigate themselves through this thing and possibly get the best benefits of what the cycle has to bring?
Yeah, that's a great question because there is it's work intensive. And what makes it work intensive are the downloads that are moving in from our galaxy's central sun into our solar system, hitting the sun in our solar system, and how our sun projects that energy onto the planet Earth. So all of us become enveloped with these higher base frequencies that are all about shifting consciousness through genetic repatterning. And so that we don't, self combust, we need to do specific types of work for our own person, mind body aptitude that allows us to absorb these higher base frequencies and properly utilize them in the body mind. And so what happens is that a lot of people absorb the energy and they aren't really conditioned and cultivated properly to work with these higher base frequencies, and they live a daily life of discomfort. And we don't want that. So it is about taking time, being aware, developing an understanding, and then having an understanding of the necessity of self-cultivation so that they can begin to morph into these higher frequencies, because the frequencies themselves, like you said, you can't escape them. You can't get away from them. So what you really want to do is unify, integrate, and become one with the frequencies. And a lot of that is changing the mind in terms of what you are, because we live in a three-dimensional construct. That's the energy of the culture that we are affiliated with, associated with. Its texture, its design is 3D. But as human beings, we're not 3D. We're 4D by nature, by design. That's why we have the different types of energy-based meridians, nadis, the chakra points, and other energy centers that are incorporated into our mind-body design. That's why those various constructs are there, because they serve us to move into higher levels of resonance that allows different, more profound experiences to take place within the body, mind, and the soul force. And so, being 4D, our journey is having a practice that gets us back into that place of self-awareness.
Just let me add one thing, Wes, to that. I mean, Wayne, to that is do you think in any relationship, because if you kind of like in paying attention and listening to people having but these babies being born these days, a guy showed me a picture of a newborn baby, and it was like hours or the next day, the baby holding his head up, looking at folks, and you're hearing these experiences of these children seem to be, you know, coming out, with so much awareness and faster than we were when they was little. You think there's any connection that is just, because people don't understand with cycles when we talk about the astrology and astronomy and stuff like that. A lot of folks and our pastors are taught to teach us, that's all hocus pocus and don't have anything to do with it. But if we're all about energy, and as we moving through the cosmos, different energy is going to be placed, on the planet, on you, affecting you, and things of that nature. That's why it brings forth a certain type of emotions or characteristics of people. So, I mean, all of us can talk about, and heard about these babies coming out, with all this newfound awareness. Is there any connection, you think?
Oh, beyond a shadow of a doubt, because everything is frequency. Everything is frequency. So the mere fact that we're being, saturated with these frequency based downloads on the planet, it affects and imprints itself on all life on planet Earth. There's no question, there's no doubt about that. And so we have to look at a lot of these children that are now being, born, are being born through a frequency that is all about tomorrow, tomorrow's dawn, tomorrow's design. They're being born into a time that really has not arrived yet, but that they are, pretty much conditioned and cultivated to move through the frequencies of tomorrow. Whereas our biggest, greatest challenge is to condition and cultivate ourselves so that we can keep up with them and be the necessary guide, and leaders, that they're going to need in order to create and acquire proper perspective of how to utilize what it is they're being given through these higher frequencies that they're being absorbed.
I'd like to take this opportunity to remind the listeners that you are listening to 360 Info Network right here on AM 1490 WERE. We are also simulcasting live to Facebook and YouTube. You can access this program through my YouTube channel. You can also access the program through Brother Hamtonio's YouTube channel, and that is The Journey with Hamtonio. With this, we are able to take your comments and your questions. You can go on Facebook and YouTube and type your question or comment into the chat, and we'll be able to post that to those who are watching us on these live streams. So again, we just want to remind you that you can participate in this program if you choose. Also, there is a website for 360 Info Network. It is 360info.networkradio.net. You can go to that website and find out more about the 360 Info Network radio platform. Brother Wayne, you talked about a few things that kind of piqued my interest, and I wanted to bring one up and basically follow up on the question that Hamtonio asked about what we can do. There are certain things that we can do to create more body awareness. You talked about the awareness that the young folk have coming into the world. What can we do to enhance our body awareness? And I'm asking this question and also giving props to Paulette Stansel, who said her first intro to qigong was purchasing a DVD, and she also heard you on WOL. So we want to give out a shout out to Paulette for logging in and watching us online today. What are some of the things that we can do to create more of a body awareness?
Qigong definitely, as Paulette mentioned, is a very powerful modality in that its inherent design is to shift a person out of their 3D uh, constructural limitations into their 4D expansiveness. And so the whole essence of Qigong is to create levels of transcendent abundance mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And so that is my modality of choice. I feel that, I have investigated and involved myself in other forms of self cultivation work. Um, I was doing yoga and teaching yoga throughout the 70s and studied with, some of the greatest masters on the planet at that time. As a matter of fact, it was Swami Satchidananda, who was Alice Coltrane, the wife of John Coltrane, who sat with me and talked to me about the Kali Yuga and told me that people did not understand the design of the Kali Yuga. And he actually, he and I sat um, together and he informed me of what its original design was really all about. So I did yoga for years and taught yoga for years, and actually established or was a co organizer and builder of the first African centered yoga institute in America, which was called Ananda Shanti out of Washington, D.C. And, we were all very much empowered, and we had classes and everything, cooking classes, classes in yoga, classes in martial arts, classes in music, you know. So the yoga game for me was ongoing and very rooted in my earlier years of self cultivation and development. But as I moved into Qigong was on a whole nother level. And because of that, that's where I've remained and have utilized the just the gifts, the biological gifts of transformation that qigong brings, in terms of just being a profound healing modality of mind, body, and soul energy.
So, in essence, what I'm hearing is that what you do with Qigong enables you to exist in a way that allows access to your four-dimensional aspect, as opposed to necessarily being, I don't want to say trapped, but bound by a 3D existence. Um, so, talk to us about the different forms, because I know after having been to one of your retreats, I know about the solar practices. I know about the healing sounds. I know about the seeding practices. Can you talk about each of those and how they are a benefit?
Yeah, and in qigong, we really look at the design of emotional integrity and the necessity, for emotional balance. And when we look at the world today, most of us navigate the environment with a lot of emotional dysfunction. So in qigong, one of the first things that you're pretty much focused upon is creating emotional balance so that you have the ability to regulate, how you operate in a world that's pretty much saturated with emotional dysfunction. So when you get that kind of energy coming at you, you're self-cultivated to respond in a very balanced way. So organ, every major organ in the body is connected to an emotional frequency. So, for example, the liver is directly connected to the emotional frequency of anger. So, when you experience anger or someone, drops that particular energy onto your person and you absorb that, where it has its greatest impact is the liver, kidneys, fear, lungs, despair, anguish, you know, spleen, anxiety, stress, so every organ has a very definitive emotional frequency that accompanies it and its design. And so in Qigong, you learn how to dispel and balance these different emotional frequencies as they relate to the specific organs in the body that they're associated with. The seated practices in Qigong that we work with deal with the movement of internal energy from one area of the body into another. So we have what are called meridians. In yoga, they're called nadis, which are literal tubes or conduits that move and run through the entire human body. That when you move energy through them, that energy has a specific resonance and expands you in terms of body, mind, and soul force opportunity, because shifting you back into 4D means that you now have complete and total control over your 3D, and you're able to navigate your 3D with greater awareness, greater ability in terms of manifestation of the things that you want, the things that you need. It gives you clarity to see around the corner before whatever is coming around the corner gets to you. And so these are the things that Qigong, imparts to the practitioner.
Okay. So you talked about the seated practices, and you also talked about the relationship between the organs and emotions. And I found it interesting when you brought up the subject of lungs, how it's related to despair and grief. And it just seems as though, and this just could be a figment of my imagination because I don't have any empirical data to prove what I'm saying, but it just seems as though we're in a cycle where death has become more in the minds of people, and because they are experiencing it to a greater extent than perhaps they did pre-pandemic, there needs to be something that we can do to address this abundance of grief that we're dealing with. You talked about fear and kidneys, and once again, you know, Black people in this country have reason to be fearful. Seems more so than others, just because we deal with the
Exactly.
things that are affecting us to a greater extent than other folks do. PJ Cooper placed this comment in the chat today, and I don't want to say the C word because of the algorithms and the censorship that's happening on YouTube. But if you could answer this question, I'm sure she would appreciate it. And again, without saying the C word.
What is the question?
The question is, what effect does those white lines in the sky that have metals in them?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
question is,
yeah.
yeah,
So
they continuously block the sun rays that would bring us energy. So she's asking, what effect does it have on us?
yeah, it has a profound effect, and it's not just their means and method of blocking sunlight, but it's also, which I feel is more relevant, um, to our life force energy, is the dropping of the various chemical compounds that move out of those clouds and find their way to Earth into our specific neighborhoods, um, because we end up inhaling into the lung cavity those particulates which find their way to Earth. And, you know, I have planes that fly over my neighborhood at 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the morning. And you have to ask yourself, why are airplanes flying over your house at an ungodly time of the night? What are they up to? What are they doing? But when you really investigate the reports, you find that, they're releasing different particulates into the atmosphere, which find their way, to Earth.
So, the idea that we can exercise a certain level of control by accessing our ability to exist in that fourth dimensional reality, would you say that that's one of the ways that we can protect ourselves from the damage that is being caused by the environmental hazards that are being created to perhaps reduce the number of people who are on the planet?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt, um, because the key, one of the main keys is that once you shift into 4D, or even in the process of shifting into 4D, your vibrational resonance becomes such that you have a filtration system that now protects you from the three-dimensional constructs that are designed to impair and disrupt how you function in the world on the daily. And the more profound you become in your own vibrational resonance, the less these three-dimensional constructs, devices have on your being. Because all of these things that they're creating to create death and limitation, to create destruction, and malintent, they're all designed through a three-dimensional technology. And when you have moved yourself into a fourth dimensional technology, they cannot imprint upon you in the same way.
Let me ask you a question, Wayne, in reference to that too, because I know you're aware of those frequency charts, where what frequency anger lies on, and the different emotion, the scales of the different emotions lining up with different types of frequencies. And I guess that's why it's important to elevate yourself to those higher level of frequencies, because would you agree that all that evil that you just talked about is resonating at the frequency that most of us lie, and therefore would be affected by those particular frequencies?
No question. Yeah, that's real. That's real.
Would
And here's a piece I want to throw I want to throw you on the bus a little bit. I don't know if we're going over into the other hour. I probably could get, if we are, another 15 minutes or so, but this may carry. Well, I might just hold this question to make sure we carry them over to the other podcast. But what I was speaking on when we talked about energy and we talked about self-cultivation and understanding the body and the meridians and things of that nature, and I believe it was during the summer or something, I did a piece. Yeah, you was there as well when we talked about, atonement and oh yeah, and we was over at the African History Museum when we was talking about here. I know our listeners' ears is gonna peak up now when we was talking about that sexual energy. How that is a sacred piece that has been really taken, in this culture, out of content of really understanding what that was all about, because this culture did not resonate on the frequency that is necessary to even expound on those type of informations and things like that. But what we should know about this whole sexual energy, and when you even involving yourself with another female, how that energy can really be used to your advantage, to help you with this awareness and take you it probably into that 4D realm that you're talking about.
Oh, no question. Yeah, I mean, sexual practice, that's a very powerful and empowering modality that can be applied to one that will pretty much ensure greater opportunity on the daily. And the reason being is that that energy is the creative force that permeates the entire universal design. And so to tap into that and to utilize it properly, yeah, it breaks all boundaries of limitation and gives the practitioner just higher levels of opportunity to master what it is that they need to do on the daily, on practical levels. It's like we have in the brain, in the mind, we have what's called the reticular activating system. And the reticular activating system basically locks us into, our own set and system of beliefs. So if we believe that we're less than, the reticular activating system goes out into our daily environment, identifies all of those things to reinforce that belief that you have that you're less than. Now, if you develop the awareness to flip that script through doing, like, say, sexual practice, to expand your creative potential, to utilize that energy to develop more expansive and more refined states of consciousness, then the reticular activating system goes out into the environment and magnetizes to your person all of those things that deal with abundance on all levels.
I'm glad you answered it that way, and I want to dive into that a little bit more when we return. We're about to make our transition over to our live streaming platforms on Facebook and YouTube. So we want to invite those of you who are listening to us on AM 1490 WERE. Join us on YouTube and Facebook. You can go to the 360 Info Network Facebook page. You can go to my Facebook page. You can also go to Hamtonio's YouTube channel, The Journey with Hamtonio. We're going to thank our guest, Brother Wayne Chandler, for joining us on the radio and continue our conversation in the next few moments. We also want to thank our engineer, Tone Harley, for all the work that he does to make sure that we can be on the radio and be on YouTube as well. So with that said, as always, to those who are listening via radio, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day. We look forward to you joining us on our live streaming platforms. And don't forget, you can go to 360infonetworkradio.net and you can find out more about 360 Info Network. We'll see you on the other side. Peace.
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 All right, so it's 12 noon straight up, and we are streaming live to Facebook and YouTube. If you want to join us on this broadcast via comment, question, anything that you want to add to the program, please feel free to reach out to us just by utilizing the chat on all of those platforms. Brother Wayne, you talked about the reticular activating system. And I'm also thinking in terms of engaging of the impartial mind as an exercise that can enhance your ability to attract abundance. Can you go a little bit deeper into how the reticular activation system works and the relationship of that to engaging the impartial mind?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when we look at the dynamic that we refer to as the impartial mind is accessed, through a specific internal practice that is identified in qigong as well as in the science of yoga. In the science of yoga, we refer to it as alternate nostril technique, practice, or breathing. And the key that most practitioners really have no awareness of is that its design is to move one into that area of the subconscious, where a lot of our abundance potentiality resides, as well as the areas of limitation that get in the way and prevent abundance from taking place. And the reticular activating system basically is a mirror of our daily reality in terms of the belief system that we navigate our daily, environment. And so With the reticular activating system, if we're thinking that we don't have the ability to achieve, to attract abundance, if we believe that we operate in a poverty consciousness and just cannot make ends meet, regardless of how much energy and effort we put into, our daily activity, then the reticular activating system is going to create that for us. And so, in creating that for us, the whole dynamic of using the impartial mind, the activation of the Akash, becomes something that can actually beat back those negative imprints that we carry about ourselves. But it has to be a dual factor. They have to operate in synchronicity with one another. So, as you're doing that practice to engage the impartial mind to beat back, like, your feeling of being less than, you have to work on why you feel that way and what you can do on the mental and the emotional to reverse that.
Yeah, and that's really a key. I'm reminded that the very first chapter of your book deals with the concept of the universe being mental, and everything that we experience in life comes through some type of a mental process. And I'm acquainted with folks who, for lack of a better way of putting it, they see the glass as being half empty all the time. And because they're trapped in a mindset that they engage with this idea that things are the way they are and they'll never be different. They're suffering through whatever traumas or whatever imprints that have been made in their lives that caused them to have that mindset. I'm just curious about what a person who is trapped in this mentality can do to reverse that mentality and perhaps embrace the idea of the glass being half full instead of half empty.
First, I mean, they have to develop an awareness that they're in a position or situation that can be transformed. Because a lot of people that are in these conditions of pure lack, as they see it, feel that there's nothing they can do to step out of that specific condition. And so they create the levels of emotional and mental incarceration for themselves. So the first thing that has to take place is they have to develop an awareness that this is something they can step out of and transform. Once they are open to that level of transformation, then they can begin to actually utilize some of the internal practices, which pretty much are designed, to expand and create a much deeper, more profound resonance that allows one to begin to feel and see the more expansive levels of abundance. And that abundance is mental, it's emotional, it's physical, it's material. And what it does, it really gives a person the ability to look at their level of opportunity in a totally different light. Just knowing that there are certain constructural modalities that can be utilized that allows freedom from the entrapments that they have pretty much put themselves in. We like to blame the culture. We like to blame the societal, network that we are integrated with as being the one thing that creates all of our woes. But that's an excuse. We have to take responsibility for our own woes, and we have to take responsibility for the removal of those woes into greater opportunities that befall us.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because it seems like we want to blame everyone but ourselves for the things that we're dealing with in life, but it's us processing things through our own minds that really shapes our realities.
Yep.
Just a question. I'm thinking about too, and I reflected back to some things, Melodon and Somi said, and this whole importance of knowing who we are in our culture. Sometimes when your thoughts on sometimes, back in the day when we had our culture and and communal tribal things going on, when people may not had the I guess the energy or the know-how in order to uh, get rid of some of those things and do that self-cultivating, on their own, how tribal things, through the music, through um, the beating of the drum, the dance, and how and answer, I guess, and partially answering Vince's question, how you get rid of some of that excess bad baggage on how our ancestors use those different types of modalities through the music, through the chanting, through those rituals and stuff like that to help an individual uh, raise their level of God consciousness and release some of that negative energy that they was possessing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think a lot of what we navigate, I think one of the things is that culturally we have to like admit that we operate within a schematic of limitation. The cultural design is based on, just less than. It's a level of density that's hard to move through, navigate. So awareness becomes like really of prime importance to know where you are in just the cultural design, of what you're dealing with on practical basis, on daily basis, um, because there are a lot of pitfalls, and everything falls back on our own individual awareness, which means that it's our responsibility to actually look for those things that will allow liberation, that will allow expansion, that will allow the methodology of freedom of mind, body, and soul force to take place. And so we have to have a certain level of intention to want to be better.
Yeah, what you're speaking of kind of reminds me of how we have been manipulated through things like money and currency. And I'm just dialing back a few years when we saw the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter and the transformative impact that it had on our universe. It seems that as though now some of what is happening is directly related to that. Can you talk about the influence that the planets are having on what we're going through right now?
Oh yeah, I mean, today is a very empowering day for change, for transformation. You know, as Pluto deals with its entry into Aquarius, and so we're looking at, you know, Pluto is about disruption. You know, it's about going in and looking at the various systems that are operating and seeing, well, how can those systems operate, you know, more better? And if not, then they need to be eradicated. So we're moving into like an entire, because the cosmological downloads, you know, that come into play, that many are in play right now, you know, are having like just their go-to, you know, with respect to the realities, you know, that are being created for us to embrace, utilize, or become a victim to. And so, again, the cosmological inferences that are taking place all are about designed intensity, dealing with change. And in that change, the possibility for opportunities to take place, to manifest, or for one to get stuck in the cosmological downloads because the frequencies are paralyzing if you're not doing something on a personal level to self cultivate. If you're not self cultivating, then the frequencies can become overwhelming. That produces mental emotional paralysis. And then you find yourself in a position where lack becomes abundant and opportunity becomes elusive.
Interesting. Just thinking about the energy of the planets, and you mentioned Pluto having that influence of disruption. When you look at Saturn, it's really about structure, and when you look at Jupiter, it's about expansion. Can you talk about how all of those things at one time could possibly affect us?
Oh, yeah, because, you know, I mean, right now, you know, Jupiter, Pisces, you know, it's the energy that it's bringing about is going to deal with expansion on spiritual, metaphysical, um, more transcendent, you know, technologies, which are our own technologies of our own development and making, and looking at those things in light of what is the best way that we can utilize the power of the planets. But again, it's about being aware. We first have to become aware of their presence and what it is they're bringing to the table. And in examining that, we look at where we sit in this current design of um, operational shifting, in that if you remember, there was a movie that came out some years back. It was called Predator versus Alien. And they were in this pyramid. And the pyramid at different times would just shift and redesign itself, reform, itself. And when that was taking place, you had to be still but aware of the shifting of the different structures and what they were bringing about and how they were going to impact you. And this is where we are today. We're in a place where everything we've known and lived in the past is rapidly changing. And what lies before us in the future is the unknown. We're moving into a place that humanity has never stepped into before. And that's on multiple levels because there are multiple dynamics of transformation that are being implemented as we speak. And the problem with that is most people have no idea what's transpiring. Most people don't. I mean, when I was in New York, and I did, this was the end of December, and I did a lecture in a mini workshop there, and the place was packed. I mean, literally, it was standing room only. And I asked the question, how many of you know of, have heard of, recognize the World Economic Forum and the name Klaus Schwab? Now, out of that entire room, only one person raised their hand. Only one person. We have to go into a place of self-education if we're going to really move beyond the limitations that are being created for us. And these limitations are, filled with different means and modalities of paralysis: mental, emotional, physical, material. We have to really begin to see that we're in a place of change. Like many say right now, what we're experiencing is the greatest shift of wealth from the assets that have been held by the middle class into the upper rungs of the upper class. And it's a level of vampirism when you really look at it. It's a level of vampirism because they're literally sucking the life essence through previously held assets of the middle class, leaving the middle class drained and impoverished. And in that level of impoverishment, that level of lack, the middle class is literally going to disappear as all of its assets are transferred into the upper class. So being aware of the shifts and all of the changes that are taking place right now cosmologically, which feed into a lot of what's transpiring, on the planet right now, as well as how that plays out through these entities that have nefarious intent in their approach, to do away with current cultural designs that we've become familiar and accustomed to using and aligning with.
You talk.
That,
Go ahead, Lynn.
yeah, not to trying to it's somewhat in the same vein when because everything that you're talking about, it kind of like holds most of us at bay because the denial or not the understanding of self and these things that are upon us that is coming down. And times past, always when I started understanding cycles and these principles and frequencies and things like that, it seemed to be and something that escaped most of us. And then dealing with it, and you spoke about the major cycle of Kali Yuga, but there's millions of mini cycles that is in between that I remember something that you said long time ago, that just during the course of a day your body is doing different things that we're unaware of, that we should be aware of to get the optimum performance out of the body. So I'm saying all that to say, with some of the stuff that we have lost over time, and when going back and talking about self-cultivation, there's and cycles and timing and things like that. We do so many things that is out of rhythm and out of timing that affects our growth, and we wondering why certain things are starting to compound on us, or we just can't seem not to be able to break through or to understand what's going on because of us knowing, unbeknownst to us, that we all out of rhythm, out of tune, and everything has a cycle with the time of the sun, the moon, the night, the day, melanin, all the rest of the stuff, secrete from your body. Those things are going on, transpiring. So you're touching on that a little bit, Wayne, about how important it is to get back to the center that we once had about understanding.
In
All the rest
essence,
of that timing with all of that. Timing is all relative to that.
yeah, in essence, the way you really summarize that is we live in a culture where it's a lot harder to live and a lot easier to expire. Everything in the culture is designed for immediate and a quickening that feeds into our personal expiration. Looking for the things that enliven us, that create vitality, and not just stimulation. See, a lot of times, because of the design of the culture, we look for those things that stimulate us, and we take those levels of stimulation as expressions of life. and they're not. Because a stimulant, it forces itself upon bodily areas and forces those areas to give out information, give out energy that those areas, more times than not, don't have to really give out. So after the stimulus has run its course, those areas that the stimulus had imprinted upon are now even more subdued, more
Depleted.
depleted, deflated. And so, what we look for are the things that are life enhancing. And those things fall into the category of invigoration. Once you become connected to things that invigorate you, then you're connected to a stream of authentic energy that truly enlivens, builds, and gives meaning to your everyday encounters from a place that is, by your design, operational, based on how you perceive, based on how you determine what it is you want, wish to see manifest in your own daily reality. So, living in this place, we really have to create our own opportunities, because those opportunities are not going to be that easily forthcoming to us just because of the basic design of the culture that we are a part of. So again, it all goes back to us, always goes back to our levels of self-awareness. And, what is the game and where do we sit in the game? And what are our best motive up in terms of operational constructs to play the game? It's a lot easier to die in this place than it is to live.
So, would you say, based on what you just shared with us, that it is possible for us to break out of the matrix? I'm reminded of what Dr. B. Sirius was talking about in terms of this idea of an eternal loop that we're trapped in, and we continue to be trapped in that cycle until we liberate ourselves from it. So, you've given us a few things that will enable us to break free from the chains of the third dimensional experience that you talked about. We have an ability to create a reality that suits us, is what I get from what you just said.
Oh, beyond a shadow of a doubt. This is dealing with the Buddha. The second noble truth of the Buddha states that our ignorance is about our clinging to the illusions that we create. These illusions reflect an improper view of life, resulting in profound obliviousness. Out of this ignorance, human beings compartmentalize and dissect the world, inhabiting and inhibiting the natural continuity of universal rhythm by putting our finite realities in fixed categories created by the mind. We are trapped in a vicious cycle where every action generates further action, and the answer to each question only poses new questions. This vicious cycle is driven by the never ending chain of cause and effect. Thus, humans repeatedly find themselves generating actions that do not lead to realization and posting questions that never yield answers. And that's the reality that we navigate on the continuum. That's where we find ourselves day in and day out. And that's the loop that Brother Sirius was talking about. The ongoing loop.
You
That's the culture
had a
we
chance,
living in.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Okay.
yeah, you had a chance to review what Dr. B shared with the folks who are drawn to his platform, and then also I think his name was Herty or Kurti, the other person who was over in Thailand. I'm curious about which of those two paradigms resonated most with you.
I mean, they both have their you know, rational and productive insights. Um, the guy who was in Thailand, a lot of what he was putting on the table, he had gotten from his teacher, and he really wasn't that familiar with the yugas. I could tell by the way he pronounced the yugas and gave information to their design that he wasn't really familiar with them, and that he was just pretty much espousing the words of kind of reiterating what was on the website of his teacher. And his teacher was saying, this is a very important period in the timing of humanity's possible ascension, and we need to take advantage of that. And so that's how he framed it. And then Dr. B, he had his way of framing it. Both, had their levels of being valid.
Well, the commonalities, from my perspective, both spoke to the need for us to exist in a state of gratitude and self-awareness, as you have pointed out, but also for us to let go of the things in the past that have bound us to a paradigm that lowers our vibrational existence. For instance, if you are harboring anger or resentment or negative feelings about someone, then those things live within you and cause you to have or experience dysfunction. And I think you've pointed it out that our emotions can affect us, infect the integrity of our organs and the way that they function in our body, and cause us to have this thing that we call disease. So I'm agreeing with you. There were certain things about both that resonated, But one thing that really kind of struck me about what Dr. B was sharing was that some of the things that we have relied on in the past are things that we need to embrace in terms of actually being us. For instance, he talked about how we use crystals, how we may use certain aspects of divine practices, certain things that we have done over the years to enhance our relationship to the unseen part of existence. And I can see how, to a certain extent, it's important for us to become the things that we depend on. But I also see the integration of our intuitive faculties, our connection with that great divine spirit that rules everything. That when we increase our awareness and we increase the level at which we vibrate, and we also remove the things that cause the dysfunction, separate ourselves from the toxic relationships that cause us to create bonds of trauma that keep us trapped. There's definitely work that we have to do. I took away from what Dr. B said that it's important that we involve ourselves in the shadow work, that we work to, I guess, eliminate the things that we don't like about ourselves that also cause us not to vibrate as highly as we can in order to be effective. Um, I have this idea that so many of us have a level of consciousness that perhaps has been cultivated over a period of time that enable us to see things as they are, to exist beyond the veil that has been placed in front of us. I wanted to go back to what you mentioned about the World Economic Forum and the fact that, you know, you're in this room full of people and nobody's ever heard, which is really kind of ironic because the WEF is actually doing advertising now. They've been doing advertising over a period of time just to plant seeds of acceptance of the things that they want to do to us that will erode our privacy, increase the amount of surveillance that exists, and you know, attempt to more effectively control populations. I think, you know, as a result of that, those of us who are sharing to the extent that we are right now have a lot of work to do. Um, After you made that comment, Brother Wayne, what did you follow up with, and how did you inform them about the existence of these parties that are attempting to do what they're doing to try to reduce us and push themselves up?
I turned on the lights. Um, you know, I let Klaus Schwab and you know his partner in arms um, just put it out there from a meeting in Davos from about a year or so ago, and I just let them speak on it, and I let the audience listen to exactly what their intentions were. And once they heard it from their mouths, it wasn't a whole lot that could be said. See, when you talk about what you perceive, you know, as their end game, and you get a lot of resistance and pushback, you just let Klaus talk about it because he's very open to talking about it. They're not trying to hide anything, nothing. I mean, I looked at an interview with Klaus Schwab um, day before yesterday, and he was really taken aback that people were resistant on a global scale to the programs that he wants to implement, which means he was really taken aback that people don't want to be slaves. And I found that to be somewhat intriguing because it shows me using a measuring stick that incorporates one's humanity, from being soulless to altruistic, that he falls way more in the soulless area of that measuring stick. And because he really doesn't get it. He really, I mean, he doesn't understand that creating an entire planet of, servants that will serve him and the elites. And he actually used that word. He said, I don't understand why there's so much resistance to us, the elites, and the programs we want to implement right now. I don't understand. I'm like, wow.
Here's the thing too, Wayne, is this. See, I'm gonna use black folks because that's what I know, and do a little studying and dealing with our mental state, and from the Willie Lynch to the Stockholm syndrome, we just haven't come to the conclusion and understand that we fall in a folks that group that is just so disconnected they're not capable of leading. I don't think we came to that conclusion because we're still following a path and a system that have shown you over time and over years that they're not capable of putting together a system that is in harmony with mankind, the plant kingdom, and the animal kingdom, and understanding that the planet itself is a living organism. He's not capable. But the psychosis that due to captivity and folks in control of everything that you're being fed mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, it got us really not being able to even understand that and look at how far out of balance and out of nature that is. They something that Professor Small said, we'd rather follow a system that is totally out of balance in nature than to look at one and embrace one that is in harmony and balance. That's a mental condition there. So I think this recognition that we're talking about, is almost like the 12-step program. Before healing can take place, you first got to recognize that we got a problem. And I think most of us are so romantically in love with the system, or just complacent, or maybe due to so many years of being in and mentally enslaved, that we can't see the forest for the trees, and in reality what it is. These are definitely, or this system that has been placed upon us is not the system that we need to be a part of. And it shows you through history and through their track record, they're not capable of leading nothing.
And and also with that, I mean, the Matrix really brought that to task. The Matrix, what I tell people is this: you can't have any kind of authentic integrative functionality without spiritual resonance.
Yes.
That permeates the entire human race. And we don't have that. That's been the one thing that they've been able to completely dismantle and remove from our functional level of how we experience reality through ourselves, through our spirit, through our soul force. By turning that off, it puts us in a position of always needing what it is that they're offering. And what they're offering, which is of nefarious intent, cannot be properly identified and recognized by us because we don't have the spirit force, the soul awareness to create perspective around the things that are given to us on the daily.
Well, it's really interesting, Brother Wayne, how dependent we are on things outside of ourselves and how we've moved away from the strengths that we have had as beings on this earth. At point, we would grow our own food. Now we go to the store. But if you look back a couple of generations, grandma and grandpa, they had the garden out in the back. They knew plants. They didn't necessarily have to depend solely on, as we do now, going online, going to Amazon, going to Whole Foods online and having our groceries delivered to us, the new paradigms of things. But it goes back to something that Brother Hamptonio brought up early in our conversation, and that was about our relationship to nature. Many of the remedies that can counteract the things that are being done to take us away from our mental, spiritual, and physical integrity are things that we can have control over. Simple things like the way they control us with clothing. I'm remembering what Dr. B was saying about fabrics. He talked about how you can wear linen and that vibrates on a certain level. You can wear cotton, organic cotton, and that vibrates on a certain level. But when you wear things like polyester and rayon and microfibers and these synthetic things that we put on our bodies, it lowers our vibrational frequency. you know we look at some of the diseases that we have, and I don't want to put out any misinformation, but I will tell you that if you have soursop in your regimen, you can experience some great things in terms of pushing disease back. If you look at brothers like Brother Yaki, who is a biochemist. He'll talk to you about what burdock root can do for you, what nettle can do for you, all these things that exist around us. But how many of us know what burdock root is? How many of us know what nettle is? How many of us know what dandelion root can do for you, or what the flowers do, or what the leaves do? These are all things that are happening around us. We have lawns, and when we see dandelions growing in the lawn, we look at it as a negative, when in fact you have something growing in your yard that can provide healing to you. But what do? We go to Home Depot, we get some Scots, and we put chemicals in our lawn to prevent the dandelions from growing. There's just so much dysfunction that happens around us, but it's because we're not taking in the information that is beneficial to us. Instead, we're watching 2 hours and 46 minutes of a Cat Williams interview, or watching the Housewives of Atlanta, or all the other distractions that are taking place. It's really interesting. We talk about the times that we're living in, and the fact that right now, if you look at what happened last week with the Iowa primaries, someone who was under indictment, who is going through a trial process, who has the potential to be identified as a felon upon conviction, is seriously being considered as president of the United States.
He's going to be president. I mean, if he makes it, you know, if he gets there in one piece, you know, I mean, his agenda is totally opposing the intention that the WEF is trying to implement. And you know, I mean, they're going to come after that cat, man. I mean, I doubt very seriously if he sees the light of day of holding that office, because what he wants to do, or at least what he's talking about doing, he's talking about doing away with CBDCs in the New Hampshire primary. Matter of fact, I'm going to play a clip tomorrow on WBC reflecting that, because he says if he steps into the presidency, he is not going to have CBDCs issued, you know, in this country. Um, he's also pushing back on the mandatory electric vehicle mandates that have been implemented by, you know, the WEF. You know, that all cars will be electric by 2030, 2032. He's saying, nah, we're not going to do that. You know, so he has literally stepped in the path of the WEF, and has been there before. When we went through the era of the sea, you know, I mean, he was ridiculed, you know, with a lot of things that he brought to the table. You know, the hydrochloroquine, the MMS, chlorine dioxide, which are all very powerful. Ivermectin, all very, very powerful. You know,
Solution.
supplemental, you know, agents that could be used for that. But yeah, he's a very interesting entity with a very interesting program of intention, and we'll see how it plays out.
Well, you know, he has a program that is supposed to be implemented in 2025, and what's really interesting is that he's proposing changing the system of taxation to provide more benefit to the wealthy and less to those who aren't. So while we could agree about, you know, we don't need CBDCs, we don't need more oppression in the system of taxation. I mean, one of his proposals is for a 30% sales tax, federal sales tax. And who can afford to pay a 30% federal sales tax? Not everyday people. It's going to be the folks who have the most, who are getting savings because they're having their taxes reduced, that will be able to thrive in that. So it's kind of like the same dynamic that exists with the governor of Florida. You know, he's opposed to central bank digital currencies as well, but at the same time, he also wants to push back on our awareness of history and our place in it. So it's a two-edged sword, you know.
Well, yeah, it is. It is. It's a double-edged sword, and I think I think for me, the way I look at it is, if someone comes to me and they say, okay, and you know, I ain't voting, you know, but if someone came to me and said, well, who are you going to vote for? I'm going to vote for the person that ain't trying to kill off the entire human race. you know, and we'll deal with the monetary aspects, you know, as they come afoot. But that's pretty much how I've always um, dealt with the positioning, you know, of this guy of Trump is, and as that is used as a measuring stick opposing the agenda, you know, of Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab wants to kill everybody. Gates wants to kill everybody. And that's what I use as my own personal measuring stick. Both of them to me are just different sides of the same coin. But if I was put in a position where I had to go for one or the other, I'm going to go for the one who's trying, who's who's not trying to kill me. You know, that's simple to me. You know, I'm just going to go for the person who's not trying to wipe me out and my entire family. You know.
Well, you know, we've been systematically pushed into this place where seems like every 4 years we're in this position where we have to choose the lesser of two evils. You know,
Exactly. That's all it is.
and it's funny too because there was a candidate. His name is Vivek. I can't remember his last name, but
Yeah, he's been put. He's going to be running with Trump as vice president.
well, yeah, because he dropped out of the race and basically said, okay, well, I'm going to support 45 now. But it's interesting. He was at a press conference a couple weeks ago when he announced that he was not going to run anymore. And somebody asked him a question about CBDCs. They asked him about central bank digital currencies, and he had a very intelligent answer for that person, which reflected the fact that he has an awareness, and a lot of those Republicans do have an awareness of central bank digital currencies, and they see it as a threat to their wealth creation, even though they're part of the elite structure in this country. But you know, the question that I often ask myself and others, Brother Wayne, is how they can implement all of these things that create a paradigm of death and destruction and not realize that it's going to affect them and their families. You know, it just boggles my mind. If you sprinkling not fairy dust from the skies and you know aluminum, strontium, and barium, it's not just escaping you, it's affecting everybody. You couldn't have a soul and participate in those types of practices. You know, it's just interesting. But I guess the thing that gives all of us a certain sense of hope when we have this understanding of our eternal aspect and not limiting our life experience to our time in these physical vessels that we're in right now. If you can see the big picture and the fact that even if they destroy the entire earth, we don't cease to exist. We just exist in a new form. Then
Yeah,
that
I
perhaps
mean, again, you know, I mean, it's always going to go back to a lack of spiritual fabric because that creates proper perspective. It creates proper integration. It creates a proper constructual design of just how we view and operate in universal order. And we don't have that. You know, they definitely don't have it. You know, ours is you know paralyzed or asleep within our own being. But you know, we're in a place now and a time where everything is going to be reformed and then re-administered in a totally different constructural way. And so the best thing that we as individuals can do is to do us. That's the best thing. To know that we are now operating in complete and total realignment, refabrication, redesign, and know that the only thing that's real and is going to endure is us, and putting that energy of self-cultivation into us. We have to now become aware that what is predictive programming? What is that? Because these are the things that are creating how we view our realities on the daily. So this movie that Obama was behind, that so many people, saw and ranting and raving about, it's predictive programming. They're letting you know what's coming. This movie that's coming out in the spring, Civil War, that's predictive programming. They've been talking about civil war in this country for about the last good 7, 8 years, because different states have completely and totally different agendas than what the government wants to implement and have everybody, acquiesce to. So the dynamic of predictive programming, I mean, like right now, whatever they come up with on the financial piece, you have 24 states, 24 states in this country that have submitted legislation to make gold and silver legal tender in those states. That is direct pushback against central bank digital currencies, which all have an expiration date, all of them. And they're spyware. Each and every one is spyware. Now, out of those 24 states, 16 have already passed that legislation to make gold and silver legal tender. So again, it goes back to our personal awareness of, damn, maybe I need to start investing in some silver, especially since it's so damn cheap right now. Maybe I need to look at, instead of dropping all my money on things that don't really serve me and have longevity, maybe I need to put a little bit of that into some gold. We need at this point to stop trying to keep up with the Joneses. We need to really come to the realization that tomorrow is not promised, and it behooves us to begin creating our own independent realities, because all hell is about to break loose, and we're going to see it in 2024. We're going to see the beginnings of that. And if you're not prepared, if I'll leave it at that, if you're not prepared.
Yeah. Let me add something there. Something that Vince said too, that with me and Dr. Whitaker had a conversation about, because I was always pondered on why, how could you, how can you take a crap at where you're living? You know what I'm trying to say? These things, when you start dealing with principles of cause and effect, and the things of taking the earth's blood out of the system, you know what I mean? The oil, it's going to have an effect on the planet, the way we do things, the way we operate, the ecosystem, things of that nature. So I was always pondering on, why would you do this where you got to lay your head and your prodigy got to come and things like that? It just don't make sense. So in having that conversation with Dr. Whitaker, and he said something that I didn't think about is one or two things. Either they don't expect to be here and be somewhere else in the future, or like Dr. Whitaker said, if he know his time is up, he said, do you fix up a piece of property that you're about to move out of? You don't do that. So, hey, pass this problem on to somebody else that's going to be in charge. So if the meek gonna inherit the earth, or as Nostradamus said, the blacks will inherit the earth, and Biden himself already talked about the country being brown and black 2040, 2050. So why fix up the place if you know your time is short? So those only two logical pieces that I can see.
I mean, I definitely believe that is a dynamic of their reality. I mean, that's pretty much inescapable just from the standpoint of genetics. But we also have to take into consideration the different, I guess, programs, modes of operation that they implement that push back against that as a reality, because, you know, never say die. Never say die. You have Gates talking about putting up various means and modes of technology to block out certain codes now that are like coming in from the sun, that are all about the shifting and the expansion, refining of our DNA, um, the expansion of consciousness. You're talking about Klaus Schwab, genetic engineering, the whole dynamic of creating transhumanism with different types of formulas, injectable formulas that will leave people. I mean, right now, Gates in an interview was just grinning from ear to ear, talking about the next pandemic that was going to envelop the earth, and was saying that, 50 million at ease, on ease, was going to be wiped out. 50 million, easy. And he's just grinning from ear to ear. So when you look at all the different programs that are being implemented right now for the removal of the lion's share of humanity, you have to question, well, maybe they think they're not going to be here, and maybe they think they are going to be here.
Well, you got folks like Elon and others that are going into outer space, and then you have folks like BGZ that are building underground bunkers. Yesterday, I saw a video where Rick Ross had an image of a caterpillar vehicle on some property that he owns, and he's building his bunker, and he's bragging about what he's going to have in his bunker. Predictive programming, you brought that up earlier, and you know that they've decided that there's going to be another pandemic, and they've named the disease something innocuous until the disease is identified as what they want it to be. So right now they're calling it disease X. So sometime within the next year, just like they did back in 2016 when they made movies that showed you what was going to happen, they're doing that now. Just a couple of things, questions that came up in the chat. Some Medusa Sunshine wants to know what movie came out, because you mentioned the film that was done by Obama, but I don't know that I know the name of it. So we want to answer that question. And then PJ Cooper asks, what should we do what should we take to prepare for this apocalypse, if we want to call it that?
Yeah, I mean, preparation begins with you first. I mean, oh man, there's so much information that you can put on the table, but it has to begin at home with you first, with your own levels of self-cultivation, your own ability to step into synchronicity with divine order, which means you want to begin building your own spiritual fabric. You want to have that in play. And outside of that, man, I mean, it's a hard call. I mean, it's you can say, well, get some land, build a house on the land, get out of the cities. All of the cities are going to become 15-minute cities eventually. They're saying that everybody in this country by the end of this year is going to be on universal basic income. Universal basic income is all connected to your social credit score. It's all connected to the tokenization of your financial assets, which will be transformed into CBDCs. So everything is set up and is already operational. We just don't know that it's operational. And we're not going to know that it's operational until we wake up and see that our entire infrastructure for our livelihood has shifted and changed substantially. So yeah, I mean, ideally, if you've got the deep pockets for it, or even the wherewithal to create that kind of a reality, I'd get out the cities, I'd get some land, maybe even get out the damn country and get some land, because it would probably be a lot easier to do that. In terms of the movie, it's something about becoming and don't get left behind. I can't remember the exact title of it. Not getting left behind. But if you put Obama's movie in Google search, it's going to come up.
Yeah, I'm doing that right now because I've had somebody suggest that I see the film, but for whatever reason, I can't remember the name of the film.
The film is supposed to be encoded with very specific frequencies towards the latter part of the film, which are supposed to really induce feelings of fear and desperation.
Yeah.
And that's being analyzed right now by different high tech operations to verify that.
Yeah, the name of the film is Leave the World Behind,
Right,
and I believe it's showing on Netflix.
Yeah,
right.
I just seen that. I just seen that the other day. Okay, I didn't know that was Obama saying.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, it
So you
was interesting. It was
you
kind of interesting and kind of left your hand. Yeah, okay, okay. Interesting. I didn't know
what
that.
what was your takeaway, Lynn?
Well, it really kind of it made you think about a few things about um, globally what could be going on and how some outside powers could be, planning to do some things, and to talk and your preparedness, your preparedness to deal with something, catastrophic that could take place, and caused by, you another outside entity, country or what have you, so it was it made you think a little bit, you know, made you think about a few things.
Well, I'd like to attempt to assist with the question that PJ Cooper is asking because of all the things that are going on right now. One of the suggestions, and I think this was brought to us by Brother Wayne, is just acquiring precious metals as a store of value and as a currency. Because when you have precious metals, you have something that can appreciate in value as juxtaposed against the US dollar, which is actually losing value with inflation. And the more that they create in terms of printing more money and creating more money in the system, the money is being devalued. So if you have something like gold and silver, you have something that will maintain its value and an increase in value, and also be a vehicle for you to expand your wealth and make it possible for you to purchase that land so that you don't have to be stuck in a 15-minute city. There are different ways that you can acquire precious metals. So there are websites that you can go to, like milesfranklin.com, moneymetals.com. You can go to these websites and you can actually have gold or silver shipped to you. You can purchase something called gold bags, which are paper and polymer instruments that have gold woven into them that you can use to make purchases in different places. Brother Wayne mentioned that there are states that have actually passed legislation so that they can use gold and silver as currency within those states. I know Texas is one of those states where they have done that. Another thing that you might want to think about in light of the fact that the grid is so fragile right now, especially in times like today where we have, you know, temperatures in the 20s. What happens if the power goes out? So one thing that you can do to prepare for what is to come is to have an auxiliary power system. So right now they're selling all kinds of solar power generators and so
15
forth and so
degrees.
on. Yeah, 15 degrees. So it's cold as you know what out there. Uh, so those are things that you can do. It's suggested that you have a food supply. So back in the day, grandma and grandpa used to can
Always.
vegetables. So have some vegetables locally grown that you have canned and have in a pantry somewhere, so that if you can't get to the store, you've got something that can sustain you. So there are a lot of things that you can do, but I think we've kind of arrived at the conclusion that the most important thing is the mental aspect of dealing with navigating this reality. We can watch films like Leave the World Behind that leave us in this place of, what's going to happen, and in this place of fear. That's exactly where they want you to be. Another thing that I would suggest, and this is just a common thing, a common sense thing, is stop watching the news so much, because the nature of the news is to bring you down to remind you of all the bad things that are going on in your environment. So you hear about the murders, you hear about the accidents, the fires, the tragedies are taking place in the world. You don't have to receive all of that information, because a lot of that information has no direct benefit to you. It's detrimental, and that's why they want to plug you into it. You know, we talked earlier about the fact that these 5 companies are owning all of the media, or most of the media, you know. So at a point, it behooves you to start looking at alternative sources for information, so that you have access to information that's going to edify you or lift you up, as opposed to being something that keeps you down because you're living in a place of fear and stress and anxiety and all of that. And then, you know, to amplify what Brother Wayne shared with us, we have to go within. We have to use practices like qigong and yoga and other modalities that can enhance our body's ability to function at an optimal level. So, you know, when you get to navigating those meridians and so forth, like for instance, this is something that I ran across the other day, Brother Wayne, and you might be able to appreciate this. But I saw this Asian lady, and she gave me 3 things that I can do to kind of wake myself up in the morning. So she said, rub your hands together like this 36 times. And then you can do this 36 times on each wrist. And then you could do this 36 times. Just doing that. And I tried it. And it was amazing, because as I was doing it, when I concluded, I could just feel sensation in my body. In the same way, doing some of the exercises that you have taught in qigong, feeling an instant reaction to what was going on. And then there's a frequency generator. You know, last week, you know, I came to the conclusion, based on methodology, that my heart chakra wasn't in balance. So I hooked myself up to a frequency generator, and I set it at 528 hertz. And then after 5 minutes, my heart chakra was balanced. So there are a lot of things that we can do just based on the choices that we make, and based on the information that we have access to. You know, it's interesting, with the internet being what it is. When you start looking for stuff, it starts finding you just based on algorithms. You know, you got the cookies and everything. You know, for instance, you go on a website and it's selling you glasses, and the next thing you know, when you go to your email, you got ads for glasses in your email, right? But when you go on certain sites like YouTube or Instagram, and you start looking at certain things, just like I got this exercise on Instagram, you know, these things will start coming to you, and everything happens for a reason. So I think there's a biblical verse, and I'm not the Bible thumper, but the verse is, seek and ye shall find. So seek those things, and the law of attraction comes into play, and it will bring that information to you, just like it brought you to AM 1490 today, and Facebook and YouTube, to get the wisdom that is coming to us from my dear brother Wayne Chandler. We've covered quite a bit, and we've been on for almost 2.5 hours. So before we conclude the broadcast, just want to ask if there's any additional insight that you want to share with us before we wind down, Brother Wayne.
Um, yeah, just, I mean, we've covered pretty much everything, you know. Just do you, you know. I think that's the most important thing, is to recognize that we are in a period of what we would measure as instability, because we're moving into new uncharted territory, and we don't really have an understanding of what that means, the significance of that. And the only thing that is truly stable, founded, and recognized and recognizable in such a environment is what you're able to do with you. You're the one grounding factor that is determining the direction that you will need to take and the survival mechanism that will be put in place when these different shifts become obvious to you. But it begins with you. You are that thing. You are that person, that being. It starts with you.
So well said and so true. Put up this information on the screen for those of you who are watching. You can get his book, Ancient Future, The Teachings and Prophetic Wisdom of the Seven Hermetic Laws of Ancient Egypt, by going to Amazon. You can also get with Brother Greg over there at the shoe repair shop behind the Harvard shopping center, the Lee Harvard Shopping Center. It's a couple doors down. I don't know if it's still there, but there used to be an African store where they sold different food products and whatnot. Which was okay. Yeah. So he's in that same strip mall right behind the Lee Harvard Shopping Center. So you can go there. He might have a copy or two there, or you can go to Amazon and get that book. It is a powerful book. I've read it a couple of times, and I could read it another time. Remembering just a couple years ago during the winter solstice, as I was reading that book twice within 2 days, Brother Wayne called me. The first day he called me, I was on page 127, and the next day he called me, I was done with the book, except for the references in the back. Brother Wayne said, "Did you read the notes?" I never forget that, man. But yes, I highly recommend you getting that book. And I'm going to post an email address in the description of this video. Brother Wayne and I are involved in meetings that we do on Sundays, except the fourth Sunday, where we talk about ways that you can acquire precious metals and certain things that you can do to prepare yourselves, not for just what is coming, but what is already here. Brother Wayne told us, a lot of the things that they're talking about, they've already implemented some of those things that they're just going to flip a switch and you won't even know. Just like last July, FedNow went live, and it was the precursor to central bank digital currencies that are being pushed back on, but maybe an eventuality. I can't help but think about Christine Lagarde, who runs the European Central Bank. And she's trying to sugarcoat it by saying, well, you'll have cash and you'll have digital cash. The choice is yours. But if you use the digital cash, it has an expiration date on it. The central bank digital currency will have an expiration date on it, and it won't be there for you to use to expand your wealth. That's what they want to do. They want to get you to a place where you can't spend more than a small amount of currency for it to be considered legitimate. So I use this example. If you live in Europe and you saved up 20,000 euros and you want to go buy a car that costs 20,000 euros, you can only spend 1,000 of those cash euros on that car, because anything beyond 1,000 is considered gray market. So they want to criminalize you for having money. This is all a part of that wealth transfer system.
You will own nothing
and be happy. And be happy. That's what they're planning. And they've said now that it's cheaper to rent than it is to own a home, because the average mortgage now is over $3,000. Whereas the rent is somewhere around $2,000. So they're really pushing to implement this whole system where they own everything and you don't own anything. You're forced to rent. You won't be able to afford the car. Actually, they want to take everybody's cars away from them. So, but anyway, we wanted to give you something positive today. we've definitely given you some tools that you can use to experience a better quality of life. And we hope that you take those things to heart and don't buy into the lies that they're trying to perpetuate to take you out of the power that you have within yourself, because we all have power within ourselves. And once we activate it, we can empower ourselves to do the things that are most beneficial to us. All that being said, like to thank you, Brother Wayne, for joining us on the broadcast today. As always,
My
our
pleasure.
brother Antonio, who created 360 Info Network, and we've taken it to another level. But we appreciate all the groundwork that was done to put us in the position that we are in today. And we will continue to bring high quality content and scholars and other folks who can give you information that will edify your lives. That being said, know
What just
yourself,
say
love
one?
yourself, be yourself. And Brother Antonio, you have another comment.
Just one thing I wanted to add to the listening on this as well. You know, before you know, the teacher, when you want to learn, you know, the teacher will appear, and you know, we have to understand that you got to recognize the problem first before anything can be done. So if we in that point of not recognize that there is an issue on what the man is doing, we'll never fix it. So once the student is ready to learn, the teacher will appear. That's all in recognition. So we'll continue to be in darkness and stay in that particular darkness until you recognize that you're following the wrong lead. Just that simple.
Yeah.
All right. Ashe, ashe, ashe.
As the youngins say, true dad.
True that.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, my
Okay.
brother. Appreciate you. Stay
Okay.
strong.
Likewise, man. Peace and power.
All
All right.
right.
Okay. Peace.